In 1857, city officials walked into a village of about 200 people and told them the ground beneath their homes no longer belonged to them. Within months, every house was pulled down. The churches and the schoolhouses came down with them. Today, 10 million people a year walk across that same ground. They call it Central Park. The village had a name. It was Seneca Village, and how it disappeared is not something most Americans were ever taught. To understand why anyone would erase this place, you have to know what it was. Seneca Village was not a slum. It was a town of black landowners. At a time when almost no black man in New York could legally vote, the people here could, because here they owned the ground under their feet. It began in 1825, when a 25-year-old named Andrew Williams bought 3 small lots for $125. The same day, a man named Epiphany Davis bought 12. Within a generation, it had grown into a real town. Around 225 people, 3 churches, 2 schools, wood frame houses with gardens and root cellars. People raised their children there and buried their dead there. Quietly, it had become one of the most stable, free black communities in the country. To see how rare that was, go back to 1821, when New York rewrote its constitution. For white men, it threw the voting rules wide open. For black men, it did the opposite. To vote, a black man now had to own at least $250 in property and to have lived in the state for 3 years. Almost nobody in the city could clear that bar. In Seneca Village, they cleared it. By 1850, more than half the black residents owned property, 5 times the rate of New Yorkers as a whole. Every deed here was also a ballot. So this was not just a neighborhood. It was one of the only places in New York where a black man counted as a full citizen. And that is what sat in the path of the park. In the early 1850s, New York decided it wanted a great public park, the largest the country had ever built, hundreds of acres in the middle of Manhattan. The land the planners drew their lines around included Seneca Village. There was a problem. You cannot easily take homes from citizens who own them and vote. So the story about those citizens had to change. The newspapers went to work. A community of homeowners and churchgoers was rewritten as a shantytown. Residents holding legal deeds were described as squatters and vagrants living in filth. Erase the people on paper first, and the land becomes easy to take. The tool was eminent domain, the government's power to seize private property for public use. The residents did not go quietly. For nearly 2 years they fought it, filing petitions, filing lawsuits, refusing to leave. They lost. Under Mayor Fernando Wood, the city pushed through. Landowners were paid, but they said the same thing over and over. The money was a fraction of what their homes were worth. On October 1st, 1857, the city reported that the last holdouts had been removed. The houses came down. The churches came down. Across the whole area being cleared for the park, about 1,600 people were pushed out. For the black families of Seneca Village, the loss was not only a home. When the land went, the vote that came with it went too. A community of citizens was turned, in one stroke, back into a community with no voice. Then the strange part. Seneca Village was not only destroyed, it was forgotten. For more than a century, the official story of Central Park barely mentioned it. Guidebooks called the land the park was built on empty, swampy, worthless. A masterpiece of green was laid down on top of the town, and the town dropped out of memory as if it had never stood there. Millions of people crossed it every year and never knew whose front doors were under their feet, except it had stood there, and it left proof. In 2011, archaeologists from Columbia University and the City University of New York got permission to dig. For 2 months, just below the lawns, they pulled the past back up. An iron tea kettle, a stoneware beer bottle, pieces of Chinese export porcelain, the kind a middle-class family set out with pride, a bone toothbrush handle, a small child's leather shoe. They found the stone foundation walls in the cellar of a house that had belonged to William Godfrey Wilson, a church sexton, still sitting in the ground. None of that comes from an empty swamp. It comes from a home, and from people who were told they had never really lived there. So here is what I keep turning over. Central Park is one of the most loved public spaces on Earth. Millions of people find peace there, and that is real. It was also built by erasing a town of black citizens and taking the votes that town had earned. And that is real too. Which one weighs more? The park we all got, or the town and the citizenship we destroyed to build it? There is no comfortable answer, and I want to hear yours. Tell me below. If this is the kind of story your history books left out, that is exactly what this channel digs up. Subscribe and stay for the next one. Because Seneca Village was not the only town America decided to bury.